What happens when the future king of England decides he's had enough? Not behind palace gates, not in a quiet private meeting, but in full, unapologetic view of the entire world? And what if that fury wasn't aimed at a foreign leader, a politician, or a scandal-hungry press? What if it was aimed at his own sister-in-law, Meghan Markle? This is the moment Prince William stopped playing polite. He didn't just confront. He didn't just criticize. He obliterated. A thunderous, royal reckoning that's been brewing for years finally erupted, and Meghan, blindsided and enraged, responded with a meltdown so volcanic that insiders are calling it her Montecito tantrum. But it wasn't just screaming behind the scenes. It was followed by something even more dramatic, a final, official warning. The last line in the sand. And this time, it wasn't just about feelings. It was about power, position, and identity. It was about stripping Meghan Markle of everything she thought she had won. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. What sparked this? Why now? And what exactly did William say that stunned even Charles into silence? Stick with me. Because once we peel back this story, the layers reveal a shocking campaign of royal sabotage, Hollywood ambition, and a bold, unprecedented strike from the man who will one day wear the crown. But before we get to that final, devastating blow, before we show you exactly how Meghan lost the last of her royal privileges, we have to start with a quiet moment. A single, subtle line of text. Just one signature. In one email. 2 little letters, HRH. It wasn't a press release. It wasn't a red carpet moment. It wasn't part of a grand public spectacle. It was supposed to be private, discreet, unnoticed. But someone noticed. And those 2 letters, Her Royal Highness, sent a tidal wave crashing through the palace, igniting a fury in Prince William that had been simmering beneath the surface for years. Let's rewind. You need to see how this powder keg was built. Because it didn't happen overnight. This wasn't just about one email. It was about all the emails. The appearances, the interviews, the suggestive branding, the constant balancing act Meghan has performed between being just Meghan and clinging to the royal title she insists she never wanted. You remember the Oprah interview, right? I didn't want a title. I just wanted my son to be safe. It's not about status. And yet, those 2 little letters keep reappearing. In published bios, on press materials, on backstage credentials at elite Hollywood events. In signature footers sent to luxury brand partners, charities, producers. HRH. 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 Officially, Meghan is not supposed to use it. The Queen made that clear when the Sussexes stepped down. They would keep their Duke and Duchess titles, but the HRH styling would be suspended. Not removed entirely, just frozen. But frozen doesn't mean available on demand. And William knew it. Still, he waited, gave grace, avoided confrontation. Until now. Because this time, it wasn't just an accidental appearance or a clumsy assistant's mistake. This time, Meghan allegedly signed an email to a European fashion house with HRH Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. And it landed, directly, in the inbox of someone very close to William. That's when everything changed. Imagine this. Prince William, returning from a royal engagement in Manchester, reviewing briefing notes in the car. Aides whispering to each other, trying to decide whether to show him. And then, the moment it's handed over, his face goes still, not shocked. He's seen this behavior before. But this time, there's something different. Resolve. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't ask for more time. He doesn't suggest Charles deal with it. He simply says, no more. This wasn't rage. This was a verdict. Because what Meghan did wasn't just a branding mistake. It was a direct challenge to the monarchy's authority. A dare. A provocation. And William doesn't flinch at dares. So what does the future King of England do when someone, anyone, challenges the integrity of the royal titles? When they use status they no longer hold to broker influence, credibility, and cash? He acts. Swiftly. Quietly. Decisively. But here's where it gets even more fascinating. William didn't call his father first. He didn't even speak to palace press officers. He called Princess Anne. And what they discussed behind closed doors in Clarence House that evening would become the foundation for the boldest royal retaliation in decades. Because Anne, she's always been the monarchy's secret weapon. No nonsense. All duty. And she's had her own share of Meghan-related grievances over the years. Grievances she's never aired publicly until now. But we'll get there. First, we have to deal with Meghan's reaction. Because when word trickled back to Montecito that William was furious and assembling a private dossier on her HRH usage, Meghan did what she always does. She doubled down. Insiders say she called her reps in LA, demanded a rebuttal, suggested the palace was overreaching, allegedly drafted a statement accusing William of gender bias and personal vendetta. And then, she made a move so bold, so brash, that even Harry was left stunned. She pitched a new Netflix series, with her as HRH the Duchess, as the central character in a drama about reinvention after royal exile. You can't make this up. By now, you're probably wondering, how did William respond to that? He didn't scream. He didn't leak. He summoned his legal team. Because this time, William wasn't just playing defense. He was ready to go on offense. Still, before any public statement could be made, before the press caught wind of what was coming, there was one final twist. Someone very close to Meghan, someone in Hollywood, leaked everything. The email, the pitch, the HRH title, the tantrum, all of it. And that leak? It changed the entire trajectory of this war. Because it meant William could act, with full public support. What came next would spark a media firestorm. Royal biographers would call it the definitive moment William stepped into his future as king. But what came next would also break Meghan in a way she never saw coming. And it all started with one private call between William and Princess Anne. The contents of that call, the names they discussed, the plan they set in motion, you won't believe it. But we're just getting started. What's more dangerous, a televised declaration or a single private email? In this case, it was the email. 2 lines, 1 signature, and 2 forbidden letters that cracked open a royal dam that had barely been holding back years of resentment, strategy, and unspoken fury. HRH. That was all it took. HRH Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. A closing line on what should have been a routine message, sent to a luxury fashion house's executive team. Friendly tone, ambitious pitch. The usual Sussex charm mixed with that aspirational self-branding Meghan had mastered since exiting the royal family. But in this case, there was a critical error. One that wasn't going to be brushed off or buried. Because this email wasn't just read by the fashion house. It was forwarded. And not to the press. To Kensington Palace. Now ask yourself, what would possess Meghan to use a title that had been explicitly off-limits since 2020? Why roll the dice? Why provoke? Was it arrogance? A mistake? Or something far more strategic? Some insiders say Meghan believed the HRH styling was hers by right, and simply forgot it had been suspended. Others claim it was intentional, part of a growing attempt to soft-test royal branding in elite circles without formal approval. But here's the truth, it wasn't the first time. And this time, she got caught red-handed. And it landed, almost poetically, in the inbox of a longtime friend of William and Kate. She didn't leak it. She didn't post it. She simply followed protocol and forwarded the email to palace staff with one chilling subject line. Thought you should see this. When William was shown the message, he didn't blink. He read it once. Then again. No commentary. No eye roll. No sarcasm. Just silence. And that silence wasn't calm. It was calculation. William had spent years absorbing blows. From interviews, memoirs, podcasts, public speaking events, Netflix documentaries, award stage speeches, and even animated portrayals. He had been called cold, emotionless, institutionalized, a co-conspirator in the alleged mistreatment of Meghan, a shadow behind the scenes. And still, he hadn't retaliated. But this time was different. Because this time, it wasn't just words. It was power. The unauthorized, provocative use of an official title in an international context, likely tied to a commercial negotiation. Meghan's use of HRH could be interpreted as an act of misrepresentation, an attempt to leverage a dormant royal privilege to gain favor, influence, or money. In royal circles, that's not just disrespectful. It's a constitutional nightmare. You see, HRH styling isn't decorative. It's not a stage prop or a fashion accessory. It signals authority, seniority, and standing within the royal framework. To use it without clearance is to imply royal endorsement. And William? He wasn't having it. But what made this even more jaw-dropping was that Meghan had done this before. There were whispers in late 2021 of signature blocks sent to British media contacts bearing the HRH tag. There were rumors that backstage passes at certain events had used the term. And most damningly, there were multiple instances, allegedly, where her reps asked to be announced with the HRH prefix at events, only to be turned down by cautious organizers who feared diplomatic backlash. And now, William had the smoking gun. In writing, he closed the email, paused, and picked up his phone, but not to call Charles, not even his press secretary. He called Princess Anne. Why? Because if there was one royal who understood the importance of protecting protocol and didn't give a damn about popularity, it was Anne. Because for all of Meghan's flair and all her media experience, the one thing she could never quite predict was William. Harry? She could handle. Charles? She could sway. The Queen? She could charm. But William? He was the one variable that remained unshakably cold, distant, and quietly powerful. She scrambled. Meetings were called. Aides were summoned. PR damage control initiated. But it was already too late. Because William wasn't going to the press. He was going to Parliament. Unofficially, at first, through back channels, discussions with constitutional experts, legal advisors, and key figures in the Privy Council. Questions were being raised. Could titles be formally revoked? Could HRH stylings be legally banned? What would it take? And then came the most ruthless move yet. William's team began compiling a dossier. Not just the email, but everything. Instances of Meghan's HRH usage. Archived footage. Red carpet slips. Internal correspondence. Framing the issue as a misunderstanding. Portraying William as overly sensitive, suggesting that Meghan's use of HRH was accidental and informal. But it didn't land. Because at that very moment, across the Atlantic, someone in Hollywood broke ranks. A publicist, high-ranking, with ties to both camps. And this person leaked the real email, word for word, including that infamous signature line. And it reached the British press. That's when the tide turned. Suddenly, headlines exploded. Meghan caught using HRH title in private email to Fashion House. Prince William furious, demands action. Royal war over titles erupts. Is this the final straw? Twitter trended. Talk shows erupted. Royal experts were scrambling to keep up. And Meghan? She lost it. Insiders say she went into a frenzy, furious at being exposed, insisting she was being targeted, blaming palace insiders for coordinated sabotage. One source, anonymous, but close, claimed she screamed at a team member. I am HRH. I earned that. But behind all the bluster was panic. Because this wasn't just another headline. This was a full-blown constitutional crisis, one that could very well end with her name erased from every official royal document and ceremonial listing. And worse, this time, she knew William wasn't bluffing. Because if there's one thing you never do, it's back the future king into a corner. Especially not with an email. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What does it look like when the heir to the throne finally loses his patience? Not in a tabloid headline, not in a whisper from a royal source, not in an awkward smile or a clipped comment to a reporter, but in private, behind thick oak doors, with no cameras, no curated expressions, no never complain, never explain. Just William, raging, but not in the way most imagine. You see, Prince William doesn't throw chairs. He doesn't scream. He doesn't slam doors. His anger is far more terrifying. It's quiet, calculated, icy. And when that infamous email hit his desk, HRH Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, there was no outburst. There was a pause, then a single line to his most senior aide. Book the Red Room. Get Anne. The Red Room. No, not some melodramatic palace code name. It's the private strategy room within Kensington Palace. A place where critical family meetings are held. Strategy is set. Silence is sacred. And calling in. That wasn't out of respect. That was a warning shot. Because when Princess Anne walks into the room, the temperature drops by 10 degrees. She's not there to comfort. She's not there to soothe. She's there to execute. And that's exactly what William wanted. According to insiders present, though none dare go on record, William started the meeting with a single sentence. She crossed the line. This isn't just embarrassing. It's illegal, and didn't argue. She sat back, folded her arms, nodded once. Told you. Let's break that down. For years, Princess and had been privately sounding alarm bells about Meghan's behavior. Not just the Netflix doc or Oprah interview, but the subtle power grabs, the branding, the image curation, the manipulation of public sentiment cloaked in American politeness and West Coast buzzwords. And hated it, because and has never cared about fame, or glamour, or magazine covers. She's about duty. And to her, Meghan's repeated use of royal language without royal responsibility was the ultimate insult. Now, William finally agreed, and they were ready to act. But what does action mean exactly? You might think stripping Meghan's titles is simple. A decree from the monarch. A public announcement. Done. Not even close. In truth, it's a political minefield. There are legal loopholes, constitutional technicalities, questions of precedent, issues of optics. Which is why William's first real move wasn't a press statement or even a private letter. It was a dossier. He began collecting everything. Not just the infamous email, but every instance of HRH usage since 2020. An unofficial team of aides, researchers, and even a retired parliamentary liaison began piecing together a document so detailed it sent chills through the Privy Council. And Anne, she provided the missing pieces. Private anecdotes from engagements where Meghan insisted on being introduced as HRH. Testimonies from international event organizers who were pressured by Meghan's team. Even a quietly circulated letter from a charity partner who said they'd been strong-armed into labeling Meghan's appearance with her royal styling. All of it, collected, archived, verified. By the end of the week, the dossier ran nearly 80 pages. Its title? Misuse of Royal Stylings and Titles. The Sussex Inconsistencies. And at the very top, in bold letters, a quote from Prince William. This institution cannot afford another silent scandal. Not again. But here's where it gets even more gripping. While William was preparing a legal and constitutional response to the HRH scandal, Meghan was preparing another media push. That's right. While William worked behind closed doors, Meghan's team was already planning to clarify the misunderstanding in the press through a soft leak to friendly American outlets. The goal? Reframe the narrative. Make it about confusion. Paint William as overreacting. And for a moment, it worked. A select few headlines began to pop up. Was Meghan's HRH signature just a branding slip? Royal rules are confusing. Could Meghan's email have been misinterpreted? William reportedly angry over minor styling issue. Is this a personal feud? But behind the scenes, William was unfazed, because he knew what was coming next. The press hadn't seen the full dossier. The leak hadn't reached the right people yet, but it was about to. William instructed his team to share the document with 3 key individuals: the Lord Chamberlain, the Cabinet Secretary, and most surprisingly, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Why the Archbishop? Because the royal titles are spiritual as well as ceremonial. And if Meghan was using HRH in contexts connected to charity, moral leadership, or spiritual representation, there was an ecclesiastical angle to consider. In short, William was covering every base. And he wasn't just doing this to punish Meghan. He was doing it to protect the crown. Because here's the brutal truth. The monarchy was entering a new era, one where public trust was brittle. Media narratives moved faster than ever. And any appearance of impropriety, especially from former royals turned Netflix producers, could cause permanent damage. This wasn't about bitterness. It was about survival. Still, one voice hadn't been heard yet. King Charles. Where was he in all this? At Sandringham. Secluded. Quiet. Not out of apathy, but out of strategy. Because Charles, ever the pragmatist, had long walked a tightrope when it came to Harry and Meghan. He wanted reconciliation, unity, healing. But William? He wasn't asking anymore. He was informing. Sources say William sent his father the full dossier and included a handwritten note. One sentence. We can't wait for her to strike again. That note hit hard. Because Charles had already been privately warned by both and Camilla that Meghan was maneuvering behind the scenes. Still, even he didn't expect what came next. Because William wasn't going to make the announcement himself. He was going to make a legal referral. That's right. He officially requested a formal review of Meghan's titles via the Royal Titles Act of 1876. and that hadn't been used in over 100 years. This was unprecedented. So what did Meghan do when she found out? She snapped. Staffers in Montecito reported an uncontrollable tantrum. Doors slammed, voices raised, frantic phone calls to lawyers, to Netflix reps, to Oprah's people. One source even claimed she yelled, "He's obsessed with destroying me. He can't stand that I moved on." But what Meghan didn't know was that someone close to her had already turned. Because while her rage echoed through the halls of her Santa Barbara mansion, a close Hollywood insider was preparing to leak everything. Emails, audio clips, screenshots of Meghan's internal conversations regarding title use. And what was in those messages? It would rattle both sides of the Atlantic. Because one line, in particular, sent shockwaves through royal advisors. A message Meghan reportedly sent to a Netflix producer. "They can't stop me from using it. HRH isn't theirs. It's mine." When William saw that quote, he didn't say a word. He simply looked at his advisor and said, "Release the statement." What statement? That's what we'll cover next. Because what William released would shake the monarchy, blindside Meghan, and split the public in two. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What happens when the most feared royal in the entire family finally says what everyone else has been too polite to admit? One word: carnage. Because Princess and doesn't play politics. She doesn't coddle feelings. She doesn't care about Instagram comments, Hollywood handlers, or public perception. She cares about the monarchy. And when she joined forces with William behind closed doors, it wasn't just an alliance. It was a war council. Let's rewind to the moment and got the call. It wasn't long after William had received the explosive HRH email from Meghan. He had already made the decision to escalate, already begun constructing the legal roadmap to strip her of all remaining titles and privileges. But he knew, if he wanted real institutional weight behind him, he needed an. So he picked up the phone. According to insiders, he said only 3 words. "It's time. Come." And was at Kensington Palace within 3 hours. No security detail. No public schedule. Just her, a leather-bound folder, and that unmistakable walk of hers. Purposeful, firm, silent. She was ready. Because and had seen this coming for years. From the moment Meghan first entered the royal fold and had her doubts. Not out of malice. Not out of jealousy. But from something far more serious. Instinct. The same instinct that had helped her navigate decades of palace intrigue, scandals, and press assaults without ever once compromising the crown. She could see through the charm, the theatrics, the branding, and she had warned Charles. Repeatedly. But no one listened. Until now. William didn't bother with pleasantries. He handed her the HRH email. Let her read it. Then handed her the dossier. She didn't flinch. She read everything. Every line. Every signature. Every attachment. Then she looked up and said, "She's daring us." Boom. That was it. Not, "Maybe we should." Not, "Let's give it time." Not, "What would the press think?" Just a blunt assessment. She's daring us. Because that's what it was. A dare. A provocation. A challenge to the very system Meghan once said she wanted nothing to do with. And yet continually used to elevate her own status, leverage deals, and command influence from California to Cannes. And wasn't having it. She leaned forward and spoke what many believe is the most cutting line uttered by any royal behind the scenes in this saga. If she wants to be Queen of Montecito, let her. But she does not get to wear our crown while building her own. Let that sink in. Because in that sentence lies the truth of the entire conflict. This isn't just about a title. It's about symbolism, legacy, power. And she was ready to go all the way. Together, she and William began crafting a more aggressive strategy, not just to contain Meghan, to remove her from the history books, from the official website, from every ceremonial list, photo, and registry. They were aiming for a scorched earth strategy, done not in anger, but in duty. Because this wasn't personal. It was principle. But here's where it gets really chilling. And didn't just bring her support. She brought receipts. Over the years, and had been quietly documenting Meghan's breaches of protocol. Not in some petty, obsessive way, but in the meticulous style of a seasoned royal who knew one day this might become necessary. She had notes, dates, witnesses, even messages. One document was especially damning. a written complaint from a Commonwealth charity organization that had hosted Meghan virtually in 2021. In it, they alleged Meghan's team had insisted on her being introduced as Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex, despite strict guidelines issued by the palace barring that styling. When they pushed back, her team reportedly threatened to withdraw from the event entirely. That alone would have been bad. And had more. Accounts from event organizers in New York. A formal letter from a British patronage claiming Meghan's HRH title had been printed on promotional materials without approval. Even a transcript of a phone call between a royal aide and Meghan's staffer where the phrase, "We don't need permission, she is HRH," was allegedly said. William was stunned, because what and had assembled wasn't just opinion. It was ammunition. This wasn't about feelings. This was about facts. The next step? Taking it higher. And that meant bringing Charles into the loop. Now, here's where the tension skyrockets. Charles and have always had a complex relationship. He's diplomatic, sensitive, often indecisive. She's blunt, steel-spined, uncompromising. When they met privately at Sandringham, just days after Anne's meeting with William, the conversation was reportedly icy and laid out everything. The HRH email, the leaked Netflix pitch, the dossier. Charles listened in silence. And then, according to palace whispers, and dropped the line that finally shook him. "You're not protecting Harry. You're protecting her. And it's weakening all of us." Charles was cornered. For months, he tried to straddle the line between maintaining family unity and enforcing royal boundaries. But now, the line was gone. Meghan had crossed it, and there was no walking it back. But even with the facts on the table, Charles hesitated. Why? Because of Harry. He feared any official punishment against Meghan would drive Harry even further away, maybe permanently, and was unmoved. She didn't want Harry punished, but she wasn't about to let his wife destabilize the entire monarchy from Montecito. Still, Charles refused to act. So William did. He took Anne's documentation, his own dossier, the HRH email, and he moved forward without his father's blessing. He contacted the Privy Council, requested formal legal guidance on title removal, prepared a preemptive public statement, drafted a legal warning to Meghan, and that's when Anne delivered the final blow. A formal memo, written, signed, and sealed, sent directly to the king's private office. In it, she laid out a stark ultimatum. Failure to act not only undermines our authority, it invites further misuse. We are either a monarchy or we are a brand. We cannot be both. Powerful, undeniable, ruthless. And the palace staff who read it applauded behind closed doors. Because finally, someone had said it, and left that day with her head high. She knew what she'd done, and she didn't regret a word. Back at Kensington, William was already preparing the next step, the warning letter. A formal declaration, delivered via royal legal channels, to Meghan Markle. What did it say? We'll reveal that in the next chapter. But just know this. It contained a sentence that would bring Meghan to tears, Harry to silence. What do you do when you feel the walls closing in? If you're Meghan Markle, you pitch a brand new series to Netflix. But this wasn't just any pitch. This wasn't another syrupy lifestyle project or glossy docuseries about global impact. This was war, on camera, dressed up in production language, disguised as a redemption arc. And it all began just days after Meghan received the official legal letter from the palace, the one that warned her in no uncertain terms. Cease all use of the HRH styling or face permanent revocation of all royal titles and privileges. But instead of pausing, she doubled down. Before we unpack the Netflix pitch, let's zoom in on that moment, because it's crucial. Sources say the letter arrived at Meghan's Montecito estate hand-delivered by legal couriers representing the royal household. It wasn't bombastic. It wasn't angry. It was precise, cold, surgical, ruthless in its clarity. One page, for paragraphs. But one line stood out in particular. You are formally advised that continued misuse of the Her Royal Highness styling, in any capacity or context, shall be considered a breach of the 2020 Sandringham Agreement and may result in further action, including revocation of remaining titles and privileges by constitutional process. Boom. No drama. No headlines. Just royal force. For most people, that would have been a gut punch. A moment to pause, reassess, apologize, retreat. But Meghan? She got on a call with her production team. Not tomorrow. Not next week. That same day. Because if the royals were threatening to erase her title, she'd immortalize her story on film. And that's when the pitch was born. It had a working title, one that hasn't yet been made public. But inside sources say it was referred to internally as Exiled, the Crown's other story. Let that sink in. A dramatized, part reality, part fictionalized hybrid miniseries about a woman pushed out by a cold institution, fighting back on her own terms. The protagonist? A beautiful, biracial American woman who marries into a centuries-old monarchy and soon discovers the hidden machinery that controls everything, only to be silenced, humiliated, and exiled. Sound familiar? It wasn't just inspired by Meghan's life. It was Meghan's life. Or at least, the version she wanted the world to see. But here's where it gets wild. This wasn't going to be another sit-down documentary. This was going to be a scripted drama, professionally cast, with a Meghan type playing the lead. Hollywood actors portraying veiled versions of William, Kate, Charles, and even the late Queen Elizabeth. It was to be her truth, wrapped in fiction. Deniable, defensible, but unmistakably her. Why? Because she believed she had nothing to lose. With the palace threatening to revoke her titles, and William quietly preparing the public for the final blow, Meghan saw an opportunity. If they were going to take the titles away, fine. She'd make the world care about that loss. She'd frame it as punishment, as control, as yet another attempt to erase a woman who simply spoke out. But here's the twist. This plan didn't come from emotion. It came from strategy. Multiple sources close to Meghan claim this was a deliberate move. She believed a dramatized series would cement her as a cultural icon, rekindle global sympathy, drown out the palace's narrative with her own. It was to be her final counterpunch. But the timing couldn't have been worse. Because just as the pitch reached Netflix executives, news of the palace's warning letter was leaked to the press. And suddenly, Meghan's entire plan was exposed. Tabloids in the UK and the US began running headlines like, Meghan's new drama. Is she fictionalizing the royal family again? Sussex's next Netflix deal could be explosive. Insiders say scripted series in the works. Palace furious over alleged Crown-style pitch from Montecito. Netflix was caught off guard. Executives who had already grown wary after the polarizing reception to Harry and Meghan were now being dragged into a firestorm of palace politics. Several senior figures reportedly urged Meghan to delay or revise the concept. But she refused. In meetings, she allegedly insisted that the project was not about revenge, but about reclaiming the narrative. She even used the word therapy. Therapy for who, though? Herself? Or the audience? Because what Meghan may not have fully grasped was how quickly public sympathy was evaporating. Especially now. Especially with William and Princess and carefully framing the royal side of the story. Not through interviews or Netflix deals, but through decisive, official action. The palace wasn't playing PR anymore. They were playing chess. And Meghan had just moved her queen directly into a trap. Why? Because the very existence of a dramatized project like Exiled could violate multiple clauses of the Sussex's exit agreement, particularly those tied to commercial exploitation of royal identities. If Meghan pushed forward, she wouldn't just risk losing Duchess of Sussex. She could lose everything. Her honorary patronages, her place on ceremonial records, even her ability to be referred to by any royal styling whatsoever. She'd be Meghan Markle, private citizen. No Duchess, no HRH, no royal acknowledgement, not even a line on the official royal family website. But Meghan didn't back down. According to a source in her production circle, she believed William's actions would blow over. That public outrage would shift to him. That the optics of a man stripping a woman of her titles would play poorly in 2025's hypersensitive cultural climate. She underestimated him. Because while she worked on scripts, William worked on law. He contacted constitutional scholars, former parliamentary advisors, even quietly consulted the Queen's former legal counsel. And what they came back with? A legally sound pathway to strip the Duchess title by Act of Parliament, if necessary. That's right. William was prepared to petition Parliament to remove Meghan's remaining titles entirely if she continued to violate the Sandringham Agreement. It hadn't been done in modern royal history, not even with Edward VIII's Wallace Simpson. But William was willing. Because to him, This wasn't just a family squabble. This was a constitutional issue, and Meghan's Netflix pitch had pushed it over the edge. But she still had one last move. A direct letter to Charles. A private, handwritten appeal to her father-in-law, reportedly begging him to intervene, pleading for a family resolution, invoking Diana's legacy, even suggesting that Harry's heart would break if her titles were revoked. It was a powerful move. Personal, emotional, desperate. But it came too late. Because Charles didn't reply. He didn't call. He didn't write. He didn't send a message through aides. He did something far more devastating. He quietly summoned the royal press secretary and signed off on something else entirely. What was it? That's what comes next. Because what Charles authorized, under pressure from William and Anne, would become the most shocking public step the monarchy had taken since the Sussex departure. And Meghan? She would find out only when the world did. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a whisper, not from a palisade, not from a British tabloid, not even from an anonymous royal source. This time, it came from Hollywood, from within Meghan's own camp. A slow, intentional drip of truth that would become a roaring tidal wave, one that neither Montecito nor the monarchy could stop. And it all began with a betrayal. Because while Meghan was busy drafting story treatments and workshopping character arcs for her Netflix pitch, someone close to her, very close, had finally had enough. A publicist, one of those elite fixers who operates behind the scenes. Known only to top-tier celebrities, political heavyweights, and billion-dollar studios. This individual had worked with Meghan for years. Through the Spotify collapse, through the Archwell rebrand, through the press fallout from the Oprah interview and the Netflix documentary. But now, they were out. Why? Because of the script. Because of Exiled. That project, Meghan's fictionalized truth about the royal family, was a bridge too far. Even for someone who had built a career cleaning up elite messes. And this publicist didn't just walk away. They walked straight into the arms of a rival PR firm in Los Angeles. And with them, they brought everything. Emails, voice notes, internal documents, meeting transcripts, screenshots of Meghan's direct messages, and among them, one single quote that would detonate like a bomb across the Atlantic. HRH isn't theirs. It's mine. That sentence, buried in a WhatsApp exchange with one of her producers, confirmed what many had only speculated until now. That Meghan knew she wasn't supposed to use the HRH styling. But she did it anyway. Deliberately. Repeatedly. Strategically. And now the proof was in writing. But here's the twist. The leak didn't go to the Daily Mail. It didn't go to Piers Morgan. It didn't even go to Dan Wootton. It went to Variety. That's right, Hollywood's flagship entertainment outlet. Why? Because this wasn't just about royals anymore. This was about reputation management in the entertainment industry. The leaker's goal wasn't just to hurt Meghan. It was to warn the studios. Be careful who you're investing in. That was the message behind the scenes. Because let's face it, Netflix had already felt the sting. Spotify was long gone, and other streamers were quietly beginning to rethink their Sussex strategies. The leak confirmed what many in the industry had started whispering. Meghan Markle was a high-risk brand, one whose controversies now outweighed her potential. And once Variety published the piece, strategically worded, carefully sourced, but undeniably damaging, it spread like wildfire. Headlines exploded across both sides of the Atlantic. Leaked messages suggest Meghan deliberately used HRH styling post-Megxit. Netflix facing pressure after Meghan's alleged title abuse surfaces. Did Meghan lie about royal titles? Hollywood turns cold amidst explosive leak. Talk show hosts pounced. TikTok lit up with speculation, memes, and commentary. Even major U.S. networks began revisiting Meghan's past interviews with renewed scrutiny. And back at Kensington Palace, William smiled. But he didn't gloat. Because he hadn't leaked anything. He didn't need to. Meghan's own circle had done the work for him. But the palace wasn't done yet. Because this leak gave them something they never expected, public cover. Now they could move forward with formal action, not as aggressors, but as defenders of integrity. And William was ready. Within 48 hours of the leak, his office quietly sent briefing packets to senior royal correspondents, political contacts, and even key figures in the Church of England. Inside those packets, 3 things. A copy of Meghan's HRH signed email to the European fashion house. A printout of the WhatsApp message. HRH isn't theirs. It's mine. A timeline of all HRH misuses since the 2020 exit agreement. It was a coordinated release, not through social media, not through press statements, but through whispers in elite corners. The goal? To build consensus, to make it inevitable. That's how William operates. Not with spectacle, with certainty. And it worked, because just days later, the Times published a carefully sourced article titled, "Is it time to strip Meghan of her titles?" The article didn't make accusations. It didn't editorialize. It posed a question. And in royal PR, that's the first step before a move is made. But over in Montecito, Meghan was imploding. The leak had sent her team into full-blown crisis mode. Phone calls, legal threats, attempted NDA enforcements. But the damage was already done. Because here's the dirty truth of Hollywood. Once you're considered radioactive, you don't get told directly. The doors just stop opening. And Meghan could feel it. Calls not returned. Meetings rescheduled. Pitches that once drew excitement now met with awkward silences. One Netflix executive, speaking off record, reportedly said, "No one wants to offend the crown. Not now. Not with this climate." Because remember, Charles was king now. And despite the drama, he remained globally respected. The entertainment industry, always chasing stability, didn't want to gamble on someone now being labeled a liability. And Meghan? She knew it. So what did she do? She went quiet. No statements. No social media. No Archwell updates. Just silence. But that wasn't surrender. It was calculation. Because behind the scenes, Meghan was crafting her own counter-narrative, a final attempt to salvage her standing, flip the script, and reframe the entire debacle as victimhood. And that move would involve someone she hadn't spoken to in months. Her father-in-law, King Charles. She would write him, not through lawyers, not through intermediaries, but directly, a handwritten letter. Emotional, dramatic, personal, begging for mercy, appealing to his heart, reopening wounds around Diana, framing William's actions as cold, punitive, and triggering for Harry. She knew it was risky, but she believed she could get through to him. And Charles? He read it. Carefully. Slowly. Alone. But he didn't respond. Not with a letter. Not with a phone call. Not even a private acknowledgement. Because that very same day, Charles signed an internal authorization document. Its purpose? To prepare a public statement, crafted with William and Anne's full backing, that would shock the world. And Meghan? She would only learn about it when everyone else did. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does a royal tantrum look like when there's no palace to contain it? No butlers to whisper warnings. No aides to intercept the meltdown. No centuries-old walls to shield it from the world. Just sprawling glass walls, Californian sunshine, and rage echoing through every designer-furnished hallway. Welcome to Montecito, where, behind the gates of a multi-million-dollar estate, Meghan Markle reportedly unleashed the most volcanic reaction of her royal saga to date. Because this time, it wasn't just a headline. It wasn't just a smear or a speculation. It was war, official, calculated, and deeply personal. Let's set the scene. Meghan had just been informed, through her lawyers, that King Charles had signed off on a press strategy to formally address her ongoing use of the HRH styling. This wasn't idle gossip. It wasn't passive-aggressive maneuvering. It was a direct consequence, greenlit by the monarch himself, and executed under the iron coordination of William and Princess Anne. And it sent Meghan spiraling. According to sources inside the Sussex circle, the moment she got the call, Montecito fell into chaos. One staffer was dismissed on the spot, accused of dropping the ball by failing to monitor leaks from Hollywood. Another was reportedly reduced to tears after Meghan screamed across the kitchen wing, demanding answers, shouting phrases like, "They're trying to erase me. Do you understand that?" It didn't stop there. Phones rang off the hook. Meghan's legal team scrambled to request copies of the royal documents. Archwell comms went dark. Scheduled meetings were canceled, postponed, or outright abandoned. Netflix execs stopped answering texts. And Harry? Caught in the crossfire. Insiders describe him as visibly shaken and defensive but disoriented, torn between his loyalty to Meghan and the sobering realization that the crown wasn't bluffing anymore. He reportedly urged Meghan to slow down, to breathe, to rethink the exiled project, to drop it entirely before it destroyed what little remained of their formal ties to the royal family. But Meghan wasn't listening. Not this time. She had worked too hard, sacrificed too much, been humiliated too often. In her mind, the palace wasn't just punishing her, it was vindicatively retaliating. She stormed through the house, flipping through printouts of headlines, pointing at phrases like deliberate misuse, public embarrassment, and constitutional crisis. She demanded public statements. She insisted on fighting fire with fire. But there was a problem. There was no one left to light the match. Even her most trusted publicists. Those who had stood by her through the Spotify fallout, the Vanity Fair backlash, the South Park mockery, were going silent. Her core communications team had shrunk dramatically in the previous year. And now, as the palace moved with frightening precision, Meghan was left exposed. So she did what she always did in moments of crisis. She crafted the narrative herself. Alone. Within hours, she began outlining what insiders described as her side of the story. A raw, emotional monologue intended for a potential sit-down interview. No network had committed. No streaming service had agreed to air it. But she was preparing it anyway. Because in her mind, if the palace was going to strip her identity, she would reclaim it on her own terms. She reportedly titled the draft document, "You Can't Take What I Am." But as Meghan scribbled ideas, Harry sat alone on the back patio, staring out over the hills of Santa Barbara, silent, brooding. Because deep down, he knew what was coming next, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Back inside, Meghan called one of her last remaining contacts in Hollywood, an actress turned producer who had long admired Meghan's tenacity. But this time, the call didn't go as planned. The friend was polite, sympathetic, but firm. "Meg, this is too hot. No one wants to be between you and the crown right now." Click. That was the moment the tantrum became something else entirely. Not just rage. Not just indignation. Desperation. Staffers say she locked herself in her bedroom for hours. Refused to eat. Refused to take calls. Refused to meet with lawyers. She reportedly texted Oprah. Twice. No reply. Even her mother, Doria, normally her rock, was said to be cautious when she visited later that evening. "Maybe it's time to let go," Doria allegedly said. But Meghan wasn't ready. She couldn't let go. Not now. Not after everything. Because letting go would mean surrender. Admitting that the palace had won. That William had outplayed her. That, and had buried her. That Charles had chosen silence over support. That even Harry, though loyal, was quietly folding under the pressure. So she did what she knew best, fight back. She instructed her team to prepare a public-facing response. Not a legal challenge. Not a formal statement. A narrative. A glossy profile. Exclusive access. Her own version of events. But here's where it all went sideways. Because while Meghan was planning her media retaliation, the palace wasn't waiting. They had their own announcement coming. And it wouldn't be through whispers. It would be public. Formal. Unavoidable. A royal press briefing had already been scheduled. The guest list was tight. Only senior correspondents. Only trusted outlets. And the title of the embargoed document? Clarification on Royal Stylings and Representations Post, 2020. Inside, a single paragraph that would detonate everything. But Meghan didn't know yet. Not until the night before the release, when a veteran royal reporter called Meghan's team for comment. "We've seen the advance copy. You might want to prepare her. It's definitive." Panic set in. Meghan reportedly demanded to see the document. But there was no way. Not until the embargo lifted. So she waited. Pacing. Fuming. Checking her phone every 5 seconds. And then, at precisely 8 a.m. London time, midnight in California, the statement dropped. The press briefing hit inboxes around the globe. And the headline? Statement from the royal household regarding former members of the royal family. Below it, the devastating line. Effective immediately, the use of the styling, Her Royal Highness, in any public, commercial, or personal capacity by the Duchess of Sussex shall be considered invalid and inappropriate. But he didn't. Meghan reportedly stormed upstairs, slammed the door, and for the first time in days, said nothing. Because there were no words left. She had lost. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What do you do when everything has been taken from you? When your royal title has been publicly neutered? when your phone calls go unanswered, when Hollywood retreats and the monarchy sharpens its knives. If you're Meghan Markle, cornered, furious, and humiliated, you do something desperate. You write, by hand, in ink. No team of lawyers, no PR spin doctors, no Netflix producers, just a single piece of embossed stationery and a letter to the king. King Charles III, the man who once walked her down the aisle, the man who reportedly told aides that Meghan was like a daughter, the man who had now, in her eyes, turned his back on her in her darkest hour. But even still, Meghan saw one last opportunity. A flickering possibility that maybe, just maybe, Charles hadn't fully hardened. So she poured herself into a letter. Not a demand, not an ultimatum, a plea. The letter was sent via courier, hand-delivered, sealed in a discreet envelope, addressed not to the king, but to Pa. That alone told palace aides everything they needed to know. This wasn't a political communication. It was personal. And in Meghan's world, personal always meant strategic. According to insiders familiar with the contents, the letter was 3 pages long, deeply emotional, filled with allusions to Diana, sprinkled with memories, regrets, and appeals for healing. She framed the public HRH statement not as a necessary royal clarification, but as an act of public shaming. She suggested that it endangered her children's legacy. She claimed that the palace had left her no choice but to explore other ways of protecting her identity. She even included a handwritten postscript. I never wanted this to be adversarial, but I won't be erased. Stop and let that settle in. I won't be erased. This wasn't just a letter, it was a final stand. A chess move against a monarchy known for its silence. And for a brief moment, it worked. Because Charles read it. Slowly, deliberately, alone in his study at Clarence House. No aides, no Camilla, no William. He sat, reportedly, for nearly an hour afterward, saying nothing. Just staring out the window. Because for all his flaws, Charles had always held on to a flicker of hope that reconciliation with Harry and Meghan was possible. And now, he was being asked, pleaded with, to undo a decision that had already become a global talking point. A decision that had earned him rare praise from both monarchists and moderates. But what choice did he really have? To reverse it now would make the crown look weak, indecisive, manipulated. It would destroy the image of stability that William and had worked so hard to project. So Charles didn't reverse the decision. But he did do something unexpected. He responded, not through a public statement, not through lawyers, but with something he hadn't done in years. He picked up the phone. The call went to Harry, not Meghan. And when Harry answered, there was a long silence before Charles reportedly said, "You know I love you, but this has gone too far." That was it. No negotiation, no opening for discussion, just a line in the sand. And Harry? According to palace sources, he wept, not out of anger, out of resignation, because in that one sentence, it became clear the bridge was burned, not exploded, but scorched enough that crossing back would require a miracle. And Meghan? She was livid, not because Charles had refused her plea, but because he had gone to Harry instead. To her, it was a calculated move, an intentional sidelining of her role in the conversation, a reassertion of royal hierarchy. It cut deep, because for years, Meghan had believed she could reach Charles in ways others couldn't, that she had a unique emotional rapport with him, that their shared artistic temperament, their shared feeling of being outsiders in their own families, gave her leverage. And now, she realized she had none. The door had been closed, softly, but firmly. And yet, Meghan wasn't done, because the letter, though failed in its intended mission, sparked a new idea. If she couldn't reach Charles privately, she'd reach the public, directly, unfiltered, emotionally. Her team began exploring options. A magazine profile, a televised sit-down, a multi-part podcast reflecting on identity, legacy, and silence. But none of the platforms were biting. Not after the HRH scandal. Not after the exiled pitch. Not after the palace's formal statement had made clear where the monarchy stood. Even Meghan's own agents were urging restraint. Maybe now's not the time. Let things cool off. But Meghan couldn't wait. Not while the public narrative was against her. Not while William's popularity was surging, bolstered by the perception that he had protected the crown from exploitation. So she crafted another message. This time, not to the king, but to her audience. A cryptic post, shared through Archwell's lesser-used social media channel. It read, "The truth always finds its voice. And when it does, you'll know why I never bowed to fear." No HRH. No Duchess reference. Just her. It was bold, defiant, loaded with subtext. But it backfired. Because the comments were brutal. Many accused her of stoking drama. Others pointed out the irony of not bowing to fear while allegedly hiding behind a fictionalized Netflix series. And still others, some of her own former fans, asked one chilling question. If you never wanted the title, why are you fighting so hard to keep it? It stung, because it hit on the contradiction at the heart of Meghan's royal identity. For years, she'd claimed she walked away from the palace. But her actions told a different story. And now, the world was starting to see it. Even in liberal circles, cracks began to form. Podcasters, opinion writers, cultural commentators who once championed her were now treading carefully, wondering aloud if perhaps, just perhaps, there had been another side to the story all along. And William? He remained silent. Not a word. Because he didn't need to say anything. The Crown had spoken, and it had done so with clarity, with force, and with legal authority. But this saga wasn't over. Because while Meghan was licking her wounds in Montecito, William was preparing a final statement. Not to the press, not to Meghan, to the people. And this time, he wasn't pulling punches. Because what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What does it look like when the heir to the throne finally loses his patience? Not in a tabloid headline, not in a whisper from a royal source, not in an awkward smile or a clipped comment to a reporter, but in private, behind thick oak doors, with no cameras, no curated expressions, no never complain, never explain. Just William, raging, but not in the way most imagine. You see, Prince William doesn't throw chairs. He doesn't scream. He doesn't slam doors. His anger is far more terrifying. It's quiet, calculated, icy. And when that infamous email hit his desk, HRH Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, there was no outburst. There was a pause, then a single line to his most senior aide. Book the Red Room. Get, and the Red Room. No, not some melodramatic palace code name. It's the private strategy room within Kensington Palace. A place where critical family meetings are held. Strategy is set. Silence is sacred. And calling in. That wasn't out of respect. That was a warning shot. Because when Princess Anne walks into the room, the temperature drops by 10 degrees. She's not there to comfort. She's not there to soothe. She's there to execute. And that's exactly what William wanted. According to insiders present, though none dare go on record, William started the meeting with a single sentence. She crossed the line. This isn't just embarrassing. It's illegal. And didn't argue. She sat back, folded her arms, nodded once. Told you. Let's break that down. For years, Princess Anne had been privately sounding alarm bells about Meghan's behavior. Not just the Netflix doc or Oprah interview, but the subtle power grabs, the branding, the image curation, the manipulation of public sentiment cloaked in American politeness and West Coast buzzwords. And hated it, because Anne has never cared about fame, or glamour, or magazine covers. She's about duty. And to her, Meghan's repeated use of royal language without royal responsibility was the ultimate insult. Now, William finally agreed, and they were ready to act. But what does action mean exactly? You might think stripping Meghan's titles is simple. A decree from the monarch. A public announcement. Done. Not even close. In truth, it's a political minefield. There are legal loopholes, constitutional technicalities, questions of precedent, issues of optics. Which is why William's first real move wasn't a press statement or even a private letter. It was a dossier. He began collecting everything. Not just the infamous email, but every instance of HRH usage since 2020. An unofficial team of aides, researchers, and even a retired parliamentary liaison began piecing together a document so detailed it sent chills through the Privy Council. And Anne, she provided the missing pieces. Private anecdotes from engagements where Meghan insisted on being introduced as HRH. Testimonies from international event organizers who were pressured by Meghan's team. Even a quietly circulated letter from a charity partner who said they'd been strong-armed into labeling Meghan's appearance with her royal styling. All of it collected, archived, verified. By the end of the week, The dossier ran nearly 80 pages. Its title? Misuse of Royal Stylings and Titles, the Sussex Inconsistencies. And at the very top, in bold letters, a quote from Prince William. This institution cannot afford another silent scandal. Not again. But here's where it gets even more gripping. While William was preparing a legal and constitutional response to the HRH scandal, Meghan was preparing another media push. That's right. While William worked behind closed doors, Meghan's team was already planning to clarify the misunderstanding in the press through a soft leak to friendly American outlets. The goal? Reframe the narrative. Make it about confusion. Paint William as overreacting. And for a moment, it worked. A select few headlines began to pop up. Was Meghan's HRH signature just a branding slip? Royal rules are confusing. Could Meghan's email have been misinterpreted? William reportedly angry over minor styling issue. Is this a personal feud? But behind the scenes, William was unfazed, because he knew what was coming next. The press hadn't seen the full dossier. The leak hadn't reached the right people yet, but it was about to. William instructed his team to share the document with three key individuals: the Lord Chamberlain, the Cabinet Secretary, and most surprisingly, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Why the Archbishop? Because the royal titles are spiritual as well as ceremonial. And if Meghan was using HRH in contexts connected to charity, moral leadership, or spiritual representation, there was an ecclesiastical angle to consider. In short, William was covering every base. And he wasn't just doing this to punish Meghan. He was doing it to protect the crown. Because here's the brutal truth. The monarchy was entering a new era, one where public trust was brittle. Media narratives moved faster than ever. And any appearance of impropriety, especially from former royals turned Netflix producers, could cause permanent damage. This wasn't about bitterness. It was about survival. Still, one voice hadn't been heard yet. King Charles. Where was he in all this? At Sandringham. Secluded. Quiet. Not out of apathy, but out of strategy. Because Charles, ever the pragmatist, had long walked a tightrope when it came to Harry and Meghan. He wanted reconciliation.